So very good morning to all. This is Rupiah Ahuja, and today we are going to discuss about some gold market fluctuations और देखेंगे न्यूज़ एनालिसिस. बट डिस्कस करने से पहले फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल लेट मी नो आप लोग को मेरी आवाज़ क्लियर है और स्क्रीन प्रॉपरली विजिबल है. इफ यस काइंडली प्रेस 1 so that we can start our session from here. ओके सो हम लोग डिस्कस करने जा रहे हैं गोल्ड के मूवमेंट के बारे में. वन डे कैंडल की बात करें तो आज हमारा गोल्ड वापस से करेक्शन की ओर एक डाउन साइड मूवमेंट दिखाते हुए दिख रहा है. 1753.99 पे ओपनिंग दिखाते हुए 1754.41 का हाई बनाते हुए 1742.16 पे अभी तक का लो और 1749.22 पे अभी मूव करते हुए देखने को मिल रहा है. आज का मूवमेंट वापस से डाउन होते हुए जैसे कि हम लोग जान रहे हैं 20-21 सितंबर को हम लोग को देखने को मिल रहा है कि फेडरल रिजर्व मीटिंग और टेपरिंग के अनाउंसमेंट उसके पहले गोल्ड को एक बार डाउन किया जाता है और गोल्ड अब तभी जा सकता है जब हम लोग को देखने को मिले कि कोविड-19 केसेस और बढ़ते हुए दिखे और यूएस की इकोनॉमी अगर डाउन होती है तो अदरवाइज सारी चीज़ें पॉजिटिव हुई तो गोल्ड एक बार वापस से 1600 1500 के टारगेट्स बना सकता है. तो देख सकते हैं अभी हम लोग मूवमेंट 15 मिनट कैंडल पे मूवमेंट देखें तो लगातार बुल ग्रीन कैंडल का फॉर्मेशन दिखाते हुए 1749.4850 के लेवल्स. हम लोग यूज़ करें अपने बोलिंगर बैंड को और बोलिंगर बैंड में प्राइजेस अपने मिड बैंड को क्रॉस करते हुए एक बार अप साइड मूव करते हुए देखने को मिल रहे हैं. और अभी हम लोग को अपने मिड बैंड से ऊपर की ओर फ्लक्चुएट करते हुए दिख रहे हैं. 3 मिनट बाद दूसरी कैंडल का फॉर्मेशन है. अगर वो भी एक अपसाइड मूवमेंट देती है तो हम लोग देख सकते हैं कि एक बाउंस बैक की उम्मीद कर सकते हैं और अदरवाइज वापस से करेक्शन दिखाती हुई 1742-43 के लेवल्स पे. तो हम लोग एक बार वॉल्यूम चेक कर लेंगे भी इस टाइम कितना ट्रेड करते हुए दिख रहा है. देख सकते हैं वॉल्यूम काफ़ी अच्छा ट्रेड करते हुए अभी थोड़ी देर पहले देखने को मिल रहा था, और अभी मॉडरेट वॉल्यूम ट्रेड करते हुए दिख रहा है, बहुत ज़्यादा वॉल्यूम ट्रेड करते हुए नहीं दिख रहा है। 15 मिनट कैंडल इस कैंडल को पूरी तरीके से फॉर्म देंगे, और उसके बाद देखेंगे कि नेक्स्ट कैंडल का मूव कैसा है। सेवनटीन 49 के लेवल्स पे 1750 एक बहुत अच्छा सब रेजिस्टेंस है, अगर उसको ब्रेक करती है तो अपसाइड मूव करते हुए दिखेगा, अदरवाइज वापस से करेक्शन। सेवनटीन 48.95 1749 के लेवल्स देख सकते हैं। 1750 का हर्डल जो अभी तक ब्रेक करते हुए नहीं दिखा है। 1749.17 2 मिनट बाद दूसरी कैंडल की ओपनिंग का टाइम देखेंगे। सबसे पहले उसका मूवमेंट और अपनी कोई पोजीशन कैरी करेंगे, उसके बाद अपनी कोई पोजीशन कैरी करने के बाद न्यूज सेक्शन को डिस्कस करेंगे हम। सेवनटीन 49.19 एक मिनट बाद दूसरी कैंडल की फॉर्मेशन का टाइम देखेंगे, उस कैंडल का मूव किस डायरेक्शन में है, तो उसके बाद अपनी किसी पोजीशन को कैरी करने के बाद ही हम लोग डिस्कस करेंगे अपना नेक्स्ट मूव, जो कि हमारा होगा न्यूज सेक्शन। 1749.20 पे एक बार वापस से अपसाइड मूव करते हुए देख सकते हैं लगातार बुल ग्रीन कैंडल के फॉर्मेशन। 1750 का अगर हर्डल ब्रेक करता है तो हम लोग एक बार बाय की पोजीशन बनाएंगे। देख सकते हैं 50 के हर्डल को ब्रेक नहीं कर पा रही है अभी हमारी कैंडल। 1 मिनट कैंडल का मूव देखेंगे तो 1 मिनट कैंडल लगातार डाउन साइड की उम्मीद दिखाते हुए, तो हम लोग अपने एक पोजीशन को यहाँ से शॉर्ट करना चाहेंगे। हम लोगों ने अपने एक पोजीशन को शॉर्ट किया हुआ है। 5 मिनट कैंडल की बात करें तो डाउन साइड सिग्नल देती हुई 1749.2025 थोड़े से अपसाइड मूव दिखाते हुए, और हम लोग की पोजीशन जो शॉर्ट की हुई है 1749.18। देख सकते हैं पूरी स्टेबिलिटी के साथ मार्केट 1749.3532 के लेवल्स पे मूव करते हुए। 1749.38 के लेवल्स पे थोड़े से अपसाइड मूव 1749.47 के लेवल बुल ट्रेन कैंडल के मोमेंट के साथ। सेवनटीन 49.3840 के लेवल। देख सकते हैं वापस से करेक्शन 1749.25, जो कि हमारी उम्मीद है कि प्राइसेस एक बार करेक्ट करते हुए दिखेंगे यहाँ से। तो हम लोग मूव करते हैं अपने न्यूज़ सेक्शन की ओर और देख लेते हैं गोल्ड का मूव। तो देख सकते हैं गोल्ड का मूव 1749.3234 के लेवल्स पे मूव करते हुए। आज की लेवल्स की बात करें तो 4.07 पॉइंट की गिरावट के साथ, दैट इज 0.23% की गिरावट के साथ अभी देखने को मिल रहा है। 1742.28 पे अभी तक का लो और 1755.13 तक का हाई बनाते हुए आज की ओपनिंग 1754.03 और प्रीवियस क्लोजिंग 1753.39। एयर वाइज चेंजेस की बात करें तो 145.30 पॉइंट्स की गिरावट के साथ, और ईयर वाइज परसेंटेज चेंजेस की बात करें तो 7.67% की गिरावट के साथ। फिफ्टी टू वीक्स हाई 1965.47, 52 वीक्स लो 1676.73। वॉल्यूम जो ट्रेड करते हुए दिख रहा है 84,22,851 के आसपास। और हम लोग एक बार ग्लोबल डेटा की बात करते हैं। सो डो जोन्स 30 एज नेगेटिव, S&P 500 नेगेटिव, बिटकॉइन नेगेटिव, फिर इसके साथ ही डैक्स 30 नेगेटिव, निकल 225 नेगेटिव। साथ ही निफ्टी 50 की अगर हम लोग बात करें तो अपने मॉडरेट लेवल पे 17,585 के लेवल्स पे मूव करते हुए। हैंग सेंग नेगेटिव, ASX 200 नेगेटिव, ब्रेंट क्रूड ऑयल नेगेटिव, WTI क्रूड नेगेटिव, यूरो USD भी नेगेटिव और डॉलर इंडेक्स आज हमारा पॉजिटिव होते हुए 0.11% की तेजी के साथ 93.336। एंड गोल्ड स्पॉट हमारा नेगेटिव होते हुए 1750 के लेवल पे। सिल्वर की बात करें तो नेगेटिव होते हुए 0.11% की गिरावट के साथ। वापस से एक बार मूव लेते हैं MT4 टर्मिनल पे, तो प्राइजेस तेजी के साथ 1749.6971 के लेवल्स पे। वापस से एक अपसाइड मूवमेंट 1749.85 1750 तक के लेवल। अगर 1750 को ब्रेक करता है तो इट वुड सी कि हम लोग को एक बार अपसाइड मूवमेंट देखने को मिल सकता है, और अदरवाइज वापस से 1747 तक के टारगेट्स हम लोग मार्केट से एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हैं। देख सकते हैं 1750 तक के लेवल, 1750.3650 के लेवल। प्राइजेस लगातार तेजी के साथ। सेवनटीन फिफ्टीज के लेवल को ब्रेक करते हुए 1750.1620। 1749.7681 देख सकते हैं। 1750 का हर्डल अभी भी ब्रेक होते हुए नहीं जा रहा है। सेवनटीन फिफ्टी का लेवल ब्रेक करते हुए 1750 का अगर लेवल ब्रेक हो रहा है तो 1755 तक के लेवल। सो हम लोग वापस से मूव करते हैं अपने न्यूज सेक्शन की ओर। सो वी आर हियर विद गोल्ड न्यूज FX स्ट्रीट। Gold refreshes monthly lows near 1745 on higher USD. Gold prices touched the lowest level in a month and continue with the previous 2 weeks downside momentum. The biggest single day fall of $30 was observed on Thursday following a higher than expected US retail sales data. एक बार हम लोग MT4 टर्मिनल पे आ जाएंगे क्योंकि 3 मिनट बाद इस कैंडल की क्लोजिंग का टाइम। 3 मिनट बाद देखेंगे इस कैंडल की क्लोजिंग का टाइम, और जिस तरीके से बार बार 1750 का लेवल रिट्रेस कर रही है, हो सकता है एक बार अपसाइड मूवमेंट दे जाए, और हो सकता है 1750 का लेवल क्रॉस न करके वापस से करेक्शन दिखाते हुए मिले। 2 मिनट बाद दूसरी कैंडल का फॉर्मेशन। सेवनटीन 50.17 के लेवल्स पे प्राइसेस मूव करते हैं। 2 मिनट बाद इस कैंडल की क्लोजिंग का टाइम। एक और कैंडल फॉर्मेशन 1749.9799 और 1750 के लेवल्स पे प्राइसेस मूव करते हुए। सेवनटीन 50.16 थोड़े से अपसाइड मूव, प्राइसेस पूरी तरीके से स्टेबल होते हुए 1750 तक के लेवल पे देख सकते हैं। लगातार बुल ग्रीन कैंडल के फॉर्मेशन 1750.7। ओके, 1 मिनट कैंडल का माउथ देखें तो लगातार बुल ग्रीन कैंडल का फॉर्मेशन होते हुए इस बार जो ब्रेकआउट आते हुए दिख रहा है 1750 के लेवल को ब्रेक करते हुए दिख रहा है। अगर पूरी तरह से ब्रेक करता है तो 1752 55 तक के टारगेट्स हम लोग एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हैं। मार्केट में लगातार तेजी। 1750.57 60 के लेवल। तो हम लोग आ जाते हैं अपने न्यूज सेक्शन पे। So the overnight slump below horizontal support near 1780 shifted the near-term bias back in favor of bearish traders. The emergence of fresh selling on Friday adds credence to negative outlook and supports prospects for further losses. Moreover, technical indicators on the daily chart have been drifting lower and are still far from being in the oversold territory. Hence, a subsequent decline towards the next relevant support around 1729-27 region remains a distinct possibility. The downside trajectory could further get extended and drag gold back towards challenging the 1700 round figure mark. On the flip side, the daily swing size around 1767-68 region now seems to act as an immediate resistance ahead of 1772 and 74 region. Any further recovery would be seen as a selling opportunity near the 1780 support breakpoint. That said, some follow through buying might trigger a short covering move and allow gold to aim back to reclaim the 1800 mark. This is closely followed by the very important 200 day simple moving average around the 1808-1810 region, which should cap the upside for XEU USD. फंडामेंटल ओवरव्यूज की बात कर ले तो गोल्ड स्ट्रगल टू प्रिजर्व इट्स इंट्राडे गेन्स एंड ड्रॉप टू द लोअर एंड ऑफ द ट्रेड ट्रेडिंग range during the early North American session. The US dollar witnessed a modest pullback from 3 weeks top touched on Thursday, which was seen as a key factor that extended some support to the dollar denominated commodity. However, renewed speculations about an earlier policy tightening by the Fed acted as a tailwind for the greenback. This in turn kept a lid on any further gains for the non-yielding yellow metal, rather prompted some fresh selling near the 1767 to 68 region. Thursday's upbeat US retail sales data underscored consumer confidence and pointed to the continuation of economic recovery. Investors now seem convinced that the Fed would eventually be rolling back its massive pandemic era stimulus later this year. This was reinforced by a fresh leg up in the US Treasury bond yields, which further uppinned the greenback. In fact, the yield on the benchmark 10-year US Treasury bonds climbed back to the 1.35% threshold. Hence, the next most important event for gold prices will be the FOMC monetary policy meeting on September 2021. Meanwhile, firming expectation for an imminent Fed taper announcement, along with persistent worried about the Delta variant and a global economic slowdown, weighed on investor sentiment. This was evident from the prevalent cautious mood around the equity markets. This might turn out to be the only factor that could help any deeper losses for the safe haven gold, at least for the time being. Market participants now look forward to the release of the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index for the short term trading opportunities on the last day of the week. One week average forecasting 1751.67. For 1 month it would be 1758.86. For 1 quarter it is 1776.50. Moving back to the MT4 terminal तो prices वापस से करेक्शन की ओर 1750 के लेवल पे और 1750.06. देख सकते हैं प्राइसेस का मूवमेंट पूरी तरीके से स्टेबिलिटी की ओर 1750.07 के लेवल्स पे मूव करते हुए 1750.2732 के लेवल्स पे थोड़ी सी तेजी के साथ लगातार प्राइजेस एक स्टेबिलिटी का माहौल बनाए हुए हैं। जिस तरीके से 50 का लेवल रिट्रेस करते हुए बार बार दिख रहा है और 49 के लेवल्स मार्केट में आते हुए पॉसिबल है एक बार करेक्शन देखने को मिल सकती है यहाँ से। सेवनटीन 50.3032 के लेवल्स पे प्राइजेस मूव करते हुए हमारी पोजीशन शॉर्ट की बनी हुई है 1749.18 के लेवल्स पे और अभी प्राइजेस 1750.31। सेवनटीन 50.3634 के लेवल्स देख सकते हैं वापस से करेक्शन 1750.0203 के लेवल। वापस से करेक्शन 1749.9794 के लेवल्स और देख सकते हैं प्राइसेस वापस से करेक्शन की ओर। जैसे कि हम लोगों ने कहा था 1750 एक बहुत अच्छा हर्डल है मार्केट के लिए जो कि ब्रेक करना इस टाइम पे थोड़ा सा मुश्किल है। देख सकते हैं प्राइसेस स्टेबल करते हुए 4 मिनट बाद इस कैंडल की क्लोजिंग का टाइम और नेक्स्ट कैंडल ओपनिंग। सेवनटीन 49.89 9192 के लेवल। उम्मीद करें थोड़े और करेक्शन की नेक्स्ट कैंडल के बाद से ताकि हम लोग की पोजीशन प्रॉफिट्स में कन्वर्ट होती हुई दिखे। मार्केट पूरी तरह से स्टेबल हो चुकी है, बहुत ज़्यादा मूवमेंट नहीं देखने को मिल रहा, वॉल्यूम भी बहुत ज़्यादा ट्रेड करते हुए नहीं है। 84 lakhs के आसपास वॉल्यूम ट्रेड करते हुए इस टाइम पे वॉल्यूम की स्टेबिलिटी आप लोग देख सकते हैं, पूरी तरीके से मार्केट स्टेबल होती दिख रही है सर्टेन वॉल्यूम के साथ। वेट करेंगे 2 मिनट का, क्योंकि 2 मिनट बाद दूसरी कैंडल फॉर्मेशन का टाइम, और देखेंगे उस कैंडल का मूव किस डायरेक्शन में है, और उसके बाद हम लोग देखेंगे कि न्यूज़ सेक्शन में आगे क्या डिस्कस करने के लिए हमारे पास। एक मिनट का वेट, 1 मिनट बाद दूसरी कैंडल फॉर्मेशन का टाइम, हमारी 15 मिनट कैंडल फिलहाल 1750.40 के लेवल्स पे। देख सकते हैं एक दूसरी कैंडल फॉर्मेशन, और ये भी लगातार तेजी के साथ 1750.5658 के लेवल्स पे। So moving towards the news section, तो हम लोग डिस्कस कर रहे हैं गोल्ड न्यूज reuters.com. So precious gold hits over 1 month low as a stronger US dollar dents appeal. Silver hits lowest level since November 2020 at $2020 22.01. Platinum hits 10-month lows of $907.50. Gold prices hit a more than 5-week low on Monday as the US dollar firmed, which market closely watching a US Federal Reserve meeting for close on when the bank will start taping its crisis area stimulus measures. Spot gold fell 0.3% to $1748.69 per ounce by 0312 GMT. Prices had touched 1741.86 earlier in this session, lowest level since August 12. US gold futures fell 0.1% to $1749. The dollar index hit a near 1 month high, hurting gold's appeal for holders of the other currencies. The market is starting to think that a taper announcement could be imminent and that there should be a hawkish surprise in the dot plots. Bullion is viewed as a hedge against the inflation and currency debasement, likely from the widespread stimulus. It's really looked like the market turns quite bearish on gold with some critical supports levels at 1780 and 1750. Giving away, and I think this opened up for a test of 1700. The Fed is expected to open the door to reducing its monthly bond purchases when it meets on September 21 to 22, while trying any actual change to US job growth in the September and beyond. The central bank is likely to release fresh opening projections and a new read on officials' interest rate expectations. Higher interest rates raise the opportunity cost of holding non interest bearing gold. Elsewhere, silver fell 1.2% to $22.13 per ounce after earlier hitting its lowest level since November 2020 at $22.01. Platinum slumped to a 10-month high of $907.50 and was last down 22.8% at $914.54. Palladium slipped 3.5% to $1945.17. सो आ जाते हैं अपने MT4 टर्मिनल पे तो प्राइजेस अगेन राइज करते हुए 1751.22 के लेवल्स पे. $1751.40 के लेवल्स पे मूवमेंट दिखाती होगी लगातार तेजी के साथ अभी भी. ओके सो मूविंग टुवर्ड्स दी फॉरेक्स फैक्ट्री कैलेंडर. तो हम लोग फॉरेक्स फैक्ट्री डेटा आज देखते हैं कि आज हम लोग का कौन सा इंपॉर्टेंट डेटा है. तो आज हमारी 20th सितंबर मंडे मार्केट और जो डेटा देखने को मिल रहा है 7:30 बजे NHP हाउसिंग मार्केट इंडेक्स. और इसमें जो डेटा हम लोग को दिख रहा है sources NHP measurement level of a diffusion index based on surveyed home builders. Usual impact actual greater than forecast is good for currency. एंड प्रीवियस देख सकते हैं 75 एक्सपेक्टेशन 74 की. अगर एक्चुअल ग्रेटर देन 74 आता है तो हमारी करेंसी के लिए स्ट्रॉन्ग और गोल्ड एक बार डाउन होते हुए दिख सकता है और वाइज वर्सा. इसके अलावा हमारे गोल्ड के लिए आज कोई इंपॉर्टेंट न्यूज़ नहीं है. सितंबर 21 की बात करते हैं तो हमारे पास जो डेटास आने वाले हैं वो है बिल्डिंग परमिट्स, USD करेंट अकाउंट, हाउसिंग स्टार्ट्स एज वेल एज ओके दिस मच. ये 3 डेटा हम लोग के आने वाले हैं. 22 सितंबर हम लोग के पास क्या डेटा देखने को मिलने वाला है तो शाम में 7:30 बजे एग्जिस्टिंग होम सेल्स. इसके साथ ही क्रूड ऑयल इन्वेंट्रीज 8 बजे का डेटा. रात में 11:30 बजे FOMC इकोनॉमिक प्रोजेक्शन, FOMC स्टेटमेंट, फेडरल फंड रेट्स. और साथ ही थर्सडे मार्केट की बात कर लें तो 23 सितंबर हमारे पास जो डेटा आएंगे वो है शाम को 6 बजे अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट क्लेम्स विच इज़ क्वाइट इम्पॉर्टेंट. 7:15 बजे फ्लैश मैन्युफैक्चरिंग PMI, फ्लैश सर्विसेज PMI एंड 7:30 बजे का डेटा CBI लीडिंग इंडेक्स मंथ टू मंथ एंड USD नेचुरल गैस. फ्राइडे को भी हमारा जो इम्पोर्टेंट है वो है फेड चेयर पर्ल स्पीक. इसके अलावा वैसे 7:30 बजे न्यू होम सेल्स के डेटा आने वाले हैं. सैटरडे सितंबर 25 हमारी 4:30 बजे FOMC मेंबर विलियम स्पीक्स देखने को मिलने वाले. तो ये सारे डेटा हम लोग को देखने को मिलेंगे इस वीक में. आज के लिए फिलहाल शाम को 7:30 बजे NHP हाउसिंग मार्केट इंडेक्स देखने को मिलने वाला है. MT4 टर्मिनल पे आ जाते हैं तो प्राइजेस 1751 के लेवल्स पे स्टेबल होते हुए। देख सकते हैं 1751 के लेवल्स बनाने के बाद वापस से 1750 तक के टारगेट्स, और हो सकता है वापस से करेक्शन दिखाते हुए मिले, क्योंकि लगातार प्राइजेस ने जो तेजी दिखाई है अभी जो क्लोजिंग दिखाते हुए मिल रहा है एक शूटिंग स्टार कैंडलस्टिक के साथ। और अगर शूटिंग स्टार कैंडलस्टिक पूरी तरीके से फॉर्म होती है क्लोजिंग के टाइम तक तो हम लोग को अच्छी खासी करेक्शन देखने को मिलेगी। हमारी पोजीशंस प्रॉफिट पे कन्वर्ट होती हुई दिखेगी 1750.8889 के लेवल्स पे मूवमेंट दिखाते हुए। वनडे कैंडल का मूव एक बार देखें तो वनडे कैंडल लगातार डाउन आती है 1742 तक के लो बनाती हुई, और अभी 1750.72 के लेवल्स पे मूव करते हुए। 1 वीक की बात करें तो लगातार दो टेरिटरी हम लोग को डाउन आती हुई दिखी है, और उम्मीद कर सकते हैं कि ये टेरिटरी भी हम लोग को डाउन आती हुई दिखे, लगातार 3 टेरिटरी। तब हम लोग को 1676 तक के लेवल्स देखने को मिल सकते हैं, जो कि हम लोग एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे हैं मार्केट से। और गोल्ड विल बी डाउन फॉर अनदर 1 टेरिटरी। देख सकते हैं 1750.85 के लेवल्स पे 2 मिनट का ब्रेक लेंगे और हम लोग डिस्कस करेंगे बाकी की चीज़ें। देख सकते हैं वैल्यूज में मोमेंटम बिल्कुल भी नहीं है 1751 तक के लेवल्स अभी मूव करते हुए। सो जब तक कि प्राइजेस में मूवमेंट देखने को मिलते हैं हम लोग आ जाते हैं अपने न्यूज़ सेक्शन पे। सो हम लोग देख रहे हैं कि आज फॉर एक्सपेक्टेड डेटा में हम लोग को सिर्फ 7:30 बजे एक न्यूज़ अच्छी आती हुई देखने को मिलने वाली है, वो है NHP हाउसिंग मार्केट इंडेक्स। एंड मूविंग बैक टू द डिस्कशन पॉइंट, so XAU USD surrenders intraday gains drop closer to 1750 level. Points to be covered today: XAU USD recovers above 1750, looks to post large weekly losses. Gold struggled to preserve its intraday gains. Next most important event for gold prices: the technical outlook, gold sentiment poll, technical confluences detector. So XAU USD recovers above 1750, looks to post large weekly losses. A combination of factors failed to assist gold to capitalize on its modest intraday gains. Hawkish Fed expectation, rising US bond yields acted as a headwind for the commodity. COVID-19 woes softer USD little to impress bulls or provide any impetus to the metal. Following Thursday's sharp decline, the XEU USD pair managed to take a rebound in the first half of the day on Friday. After climbing to a daily high of 1767, however, gold lost its traction in the early American trading hours and dropped below 1750 amid renewed USD strength. So, what we are saying ki on Friday, in the first half of the session, prices has reached at the level of 1767 itself, and that was the good resistance for the market, and market lost its traction from that level. And in American opening, that is USA opening session, prices has reached at the level of 1750 itself amid because of the growth in the US. So nevertheless, the risk averse market environment, as reflected by a 0.9% decline in the S&P 500 index, seems to be helping the precious metal find demand as if heaven and limit its losses. As of writing, XEU USD was virtually unchanged at the level of 1754, but down 1.9% for the week. Gold struggled to preserve its intraday gains and dropped to the lower end of the daily trading range during the early North American session. The US dollar witnessed a modest pullback from the 3 week top touched on Thursday, which was seen as a key factor that extended some support to the dollar denominated commodity. However, renewed speculation about an earlier policy tightening by the Fed acted as a tailwind for the greenback. This in turn kept a lid on any further gains for the non-yielding yellow metal, rather prompting some fresh selling near the 1767 to 68 region. Moving back to the MT4 terminal, and prices are at the लोअर एंड 1750.0106 के लेवल्स पे मूव करते हुए देख सकते हैं 1750.1318 के लेवल्स। देख सकते हैं प्राइसेस करेक्शन के साथ 1752 के लेवल को रिट्रेस नहीं कर पाए, वापस से 1750 के लेवल पे आते हुए। ओके, प्राइसेस पूरी तरीके से स्टेबिलिटी के साथ वी आर मूविंग टुवर्ड्स द न्यूज सेक्शन। तो यूएस रिटेल सेल्स हैज डिस्कवर्ड consumer confidence. Thursday's upbeat US retail sales data underscored consumer confidence and pointed to the continuation of economic recovery. Investors now seem convinced that the Fed will eventually begin rolling back its massive pandemic era stimulus later than this year. Next most important event for gold prices. This was reinforced by a fresh leg up in the US Treasury bond yields, which further underpinned the greenback. In fact, the yield on the benchmark 10-year US government bonds climbed back to the 1.35% threshold. Hence, the next most important event for the gold prices will be the FOMC monetary policy meeting on September 2021. An imminent Fed taper announcement. So, meanwhile, firming expectation for an imminent Fed taper announcement, along with persistent worried about the Delta variant and a global economic slowdown, weighed on investors' sentiment. This was evident from the prevalent cautious mood around the equity markets. This might turn out to be the only factor that could help limit any deeper losses for the safe haven gold, at least for the time being. Market participants now look forward to the release of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index for some short-term trading opportunities on the last day of the week. So the technical outlook, the overnight slump below horizontal support near the 1780 shifted the near-term bias back in favor of bearish traders. The emergence of fresh selling on Friday adds credence to the negative outlook and supports prospect for further losses. Moreover, technical indicators on the daily chart have been drifting lower and are still far from being in the oversold territory. Hence, a subsequent decline towards the next relevant support around the 1729 to 27 region remains a distinct possibility. The downward trajectory could further get extended and drag gold back towards the challenging the 1700 round figure mark. On the flip side, the daily swing highs around the 1767 to 68 region now seems to act as an immediate resistance ahead of 1772 to 74 region. Any further recovery would be seen as a selling opportunity near the 1780 support breakpoint. That said, some follow through buying might trigger a short covering move and allow gold to aim back to reclaim the 1800 mark. This is closely followed by the very important 200 days simple moving average around the 1800 to 1810 region, which could cap the upside for the XAU-USD. So gold sentiment polls, the FX Street forecast poll pointed a mixed picture in the near term with experts splitting up eventually between bullish, bearish, and neutral forecast for the gold, reflecting the indecisiveness. The average target on a 1 week view sits at 1751 around Friday's closing level. Although the 1 month viewpoint to be bullish trend shift, the average forecast of 1758 suggests that a convincing recovery is not expected. So the technical confluence detector is showing that XAU-USD has weak support at 1746, which is the convergence of the Bollinger Band 4-hour lower and the previous day's low. The critical line in the send for the yellow metal is 1743, which is where the all-important Fibonacci 38.2% 1 month hits the price. Looking up, two resistance lines are height. First, 1758 is the confluence of the Fibonacci 23.6% 1 day, the simple moving average 100 to 15 meter, and the Bollinger Band 1 hour middle. The second line is the 1765, which is the meeting point of the Fibonacci 38.2% 1 day and the Bollinger Band 1 hour upper. सो आ जाते हैं अपने MT4 टर्मिनल पे और देख लेते हैं गोल्ड के प्राइसेस. तो गोल्ड के प्राइसेस वापस से सेम लेवल पे 1750.42. देख सकते हैं 1749-48 के लेवल्स बनाने के बाद वापस से प्राइसेस 1751 के लेवल्स पर मूव करते हुए. 1751 तक के लेवल्स। देख सकते हैं प्राइसेस पूरी स्टेबिलिटी के साथ 1751 के लेवल्स पे। एक दूसरी कैंडल फॉर्मेशन 1751.2623 के लेवल्स पे मूव करते हुए। वापस से एक शॉर्ट रेड कैंडल के मूवमेंट देखते हुए प्राइसेस। सो हम लोग एक बार आ जाते हैं गोल्ड न्यूज़ किटको डॉट कॉम पे एंड वी आर सीइंग गोल्ड न्यूज़ किटको. सो हम लोग एक बार इस क्लिप को देखेंगे.
It was not a good week for gold. Prices hit 4-week lows, and markets are now anticipating a far less dovish Federal Reserve at next week's monetary policy meeting. Here's a look at Kitco's top 3 stories of the week. At number 3, gold is in no man's land after the precious metal fell to 1750 an ounce in the aftermath of better than expected US retail sales numbers. A stronger retail sales sector means a more hawkish Federal Reserve down the road, and that translates into tapering sooner rather than later. Bullion Futures chief market strategist Phil Strebel tells Kitco that there was a lot of technical damage done as gold fell more than $40 on Thursday. At number 2, CNBC's Jim Cramer says you're better off holding cash and gold during what he calls the coolest month of September. Cramer tells investors that the US stock market can be dangerous with rolling corrections all over the place. The Mad Money host believes that right now you're better off keeping some cash and owning some gold, stating that the point is to get ahead of those who are unaware that September 17th typically kicks off the toughest time of the year. Even the World Gold Council, which rarely comments on when it is best to buy or sell gold, stated this week that September is one of the most opportune times to purchase the precious metal. And coming in at number 1, hot uranium prices. Uranium has taken over the commodity headlines as prices surge to multi-year highs. Growing demand and a tight market are triggering a strong rally. At the beginning of the week, the major Canadian uranium miner Cameco was the second most mentioned stock ticker on Reddit's Wall Street Bets. Analysts are also crediting the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust Fund, which gives investors direct access to the physical metal, with adding liquidity to the market and helping raise stock prices in the sector. That's a look at our top 3 stories of the week. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and for more headlines, check out kitco.com.
So gold and silver trade higher ahead of European Open. So gold and silver have moved higher heading into the European Open this morning. Gold is now trading at 1765 after a 2.62% fall on Thursday, with its morning move looking like a retracement at the moment. Silver looks like it could be testing the previous wave zone support on the daily chart. In the rest of the commodity sleeping complex, copper have moved 0.27% higher and spot WTI has dropped in a minus 0.48%. Looking at the risk sentiment in the Asia Pacific area, the SX dropped while the Shanghai Composite and Nikkei 225 traded well. Further in Europe are pointing towards a positive open. In FX markets, after a good performance on Thursday, the dollar index is 0.3% lower. The biggest move overnight in the AUD USD, which rose 0.23%. In the crypto space, BTC USD is 0.40% in the black trading at $47,945. Major news stories from overnight. Global Times editor in chief give a warning that Evergrande for a bailout won't be a given. It was also said the Evergrande's potential downfall is unlikely to trigger a systematic risk akin to that of Lehman Brothers. UK August retail sales 0.9% down versus 0.5% up month to month expected. Biden, Pelosi, and Schumer all agree Trump tax cuts may be repealed. US President Biden looks to get the USA back into the Pacific target peaked. China says it's fully vaccinated more than 1 billion people against COVID 19, over 70% of its total population. Engine manufacturing PMI for August 40.1, prior for 60.62%. US and Australia issues a joint statement that they will strengthen ties with Taiwan. The ECB has stated that reports of a rate hike in British financial media were not correct. Looking ahead to the rest of the session, highlights include the quadruple, witching a University of Michigan data and ECB surveys of monetary analyst. तो एक बार MT4 टर्मिनल पे तो प्राइसेस वापस से करेक्ट करते हुए 1750 के लेवल्स पे देखने को मिल रहा है. 1750.75 के लेवल्स पे प्राइसेस करेक्शन की ओर. सो हम लोग देखेंगे क्लिप दैट
Kitco News special coverage of the Precious Metals Summit is brought to you by Corvus Gold.
We're continuing our coverage at the Precious Metals Summit in Beaver Creek. Here with me is Dan Oliver, founder of Mermican Capital. Welcome
Thanks
back.
for having me again.
You're famous in our show for calling $10,000 gold.
We'll get there.
10K gold man. Let's talk about that again this time. But first, I want to talk about some of the other macro variables that you brought up to me offline.
Sure.
One of them was interesting to me. A credit collapse, a potential credit collapse. Now that could take on many different forms. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I mean, this is just straight, a little bit about Mises, which is that what happens in the bank system is you go to the bank with $100, you deposit the bank, and they lend out $10,000. That's how the fractured banking system works. And that $10,000 or $1,000, whatever the multiplier is, goes into the asset markets because that's what banks lend against. And so you get rising asset prices. And so when prices, in a free market, increasing price equals scarcity. So entrepreneurs run out and they start constructing all sorts of new assets, and what you wind up with overcapacity. And when you have overcapacity, rents go down, right? You can't charge the same amount for your service if you got too much of it. And then the companies that invest in these things can't make their cash flows, they can't make their payments to the bank, they blow up, the bank blows up. And in the 19th century, going back thousands of years, that was the end of the story. Everyone went broke, and then 18 months later, people picked up the pieces and moved on. But now we have something called the Federal Reserve, and they run in, and they recapitalize the banks, they print up new reserves, give them to the banks, and the system goes on only worse because now the banks have more capital to invest in more fixed assets. And so what you see in the US and China and everywhere there's a credit bubble, you see massive overinvestment in fixed capital. And by the way, the same thing happened in Weimar Germany, right? It was the same thing. They had interest rates sharply negative. You had people investing not in consumer goods, but in capital. And you keep doing that. And Venus's point was eventually what happens is either you abandon the project and you wind up with the 1930 situation where all this overcapacity liquidates, you get a depression, or you keep printing the money till the currency evaporates and you wind up in hyperinflation. And then you get a depression anyway, you just get an inflationary depression instead of a deflationary depression.
Isn't the purpose of the Federal Reserve to prevent that kind of scenario from happening? They are the lender of last resort, after all.
Well, they can prevent a deflation or collapse, and that was the famous speech by Bernanke, where he said that the U.S. has a technology called a printing press, and he said this, right, that they could always produce positive inflation to avoid the debt collapse that was the 30s, right? But again, what the Austrians would counter is, yes, you can do that, but at the cost of tanking the currency one day, Weimar style. And that's where we're sort of headed. We're not there yet. It'll take a time to get there, but that's where we're headed ultimately.
What do you think about monetary policy right now? What directions, what options does the Federal Reserve have, given that inflation is currently at 5%? It's interesting because we talked last, you and I, in February, and I asked you, what would happen if inflation gets to 4 or 5%? Well, we're there now, Dan.
Yeah, well, and of course, as we all know, we're not really at 4 or 5%. We're more like 12% because the numbers are cooked. Sure. They keep changing the CPI because all sorts of payments are based on CPI. So by cheating, they can reduce the payments. But no, I think the Fed's in a real box, right? Because it's interesting. There's a schism inside the Fed, which you can see. The Federal Reserve governors that come from the regional banks, and they spend all day long talking to companies in their regions. And the companies are calling up, complaining about input prices and saying, look, we're getting crushed on margins because input prices are going up. You got to stop the money printing, you got to taper. And so all kinds of speeches by regional Fed governors saying, hey, we got to taper. Then you shift over to the DC folks, the New York Fed, with all the financial people, and they say, hey, look, all the economic numbers are terrible, right? Unemployment the employment numbers were horrible last week. Housing prices are weak. Commodities are actually weak in some sectors, lumber, for example. So they're saying, hey, look, we're missing aggregate demand here. Let's not repeat the mistake of 1937 where we tapered too soon, the monetary easing. And so you've got this confidence in the Fed. And the problem is that if they print more, you're going to see more inflation. You're going to see more cost of business going up. If they stop printing, you're going to see the asset markets melt down. And so if you're a Fed, what do you do? It's a really, really bad choice. And this is the box they put themselves in.
Well, back in 2013, when the Fed then announced tapering, we had what we now call a taper tantrum. Yeah. Stock markets reacted adversely. We had a shoot up in the bond yields. None of that happened this time. After Jackson Hole, we did not see an adverse market reaction from the stock markets. We did not see bond yields tick up. We didn't even see gold move dramatically. What happened?
Well, there are two ideas I have on that. One is, A, the market doesn't believe the Fed, which is certainly possible because they do a lot of talk, but in fact, they're still printing $120 billion a month. And actually, if you look at a 8-week rolling average of the money printing, it's accelerating. It's actually going more. So they talk about tapering, they're actually printing faster. The other thing is that the people, I think, forget and should remember is that the Fed doesn't blow bubbles. The Fed gives the banks reserves, and the banks use those reserves to blow the bubbles. The banks blow the bubbles. And so, same thing when liftoff happened in 2016 under Yellen. Everyone thought, oh my God, rates are going up, the market's going to tank. Well, no. The banks were so chock-a-block full of reserves, you don't need more reserves. And so, the banks went merrily on their way, funding things in the bubble. The everything bubble kept going. So I think that the tapering isn't that important for the bubble. What's more important is that banks have tons of reserves. They've got to find people to lend it to, right? The Fed is all about credit growth. Well, I mean, it's great to buy Fannie Mae debt because it's quasi-guaranteed by the state or treasury bonds, but how many small businesses out there are in a position to borrow money right now? Or even individuals, even consumers, as all the stimulus disappears, or the eviction moratorium goes away, right? Unemployment is not recovering. So the banks have all these reserves; they got nowhere to put them, and that's a real problem for the Fed.
Well, why wouldn't you take advantage of low rates right now if you're a consumer or a small business?
Well, if you can get it, right? I mean, if you're already rich, they'll lend you tons of money. You don't really need it, right? If you're not rich, you're not doing well, they won't lend you the money.
Right.
So I mean, it's not a situation like we had in 2004, right, where subprime people were getting credit, or the goldfish were getting credit, cats and dogs would get credit applications, right, or even 2013 that started happening again, right. Now, because of the continuing COVID disaster of the government response on the economy, there are very few people who are eligible to borrow money. So the banks have tons of reserves; they don't need more, but there's no one to lend to.
Let me ask you this: do you think interest rates would rise naturally? The 10-year yield, for example, or even the 30-year yield would rise by themselves, even if the Fed takes no action?
Well, okay. The problem with the treasury bond market is that you've got the Democrats in firm control of D.C., right, and they want to spend a lot of money, right? and so that's going to come from somewhere. Well, it's not coming from tax revenue, and especially not coming from tax revenue if the market tanks. It looks like the market's very toppy. Again, the market is challenged with rising costs and declining revenue. There are all sorts of profit warnings that are already arriving. And in fact, I'd point out that the Atlanta Fed does a GDP Now figure where they purport to be able to tell on a day-to-day basis where GDP is for Q3, or an ongoing thing. It was at 6.2% mid-August. It's down to 3.7%. Mm-hmm. So it had a major decline. And so again, you got to ask yourself, is the Fed really going to taper into the face of weakening GDP, weakening employment, all these bad economic figures? And it's hard to imagine they're going to.
Bottom line, markets don't believe any tapering talk right now.
I think it's a stretch, but again, if they do taper, I think you'll see asset market. I mean, boys, asset markets are going to run into trouble anyway because because margins are having such problems, right? You've got revenue problems, you've got cost problems, and so the market tanks. What's the Fed going to do? The whole system relies on rising asset prices, right? Prices go up, you sell it, you pay capital gains tax, it funds the treasury property. And back to your question, the point is, if the Fed stops printing the money, who's going to buy the treasury bonds? What's going to happen to interest rates when the Treasury has to issue all these treasury bonds to fund the state, and the Fed's not buying? Who's going to buy all those things?
Excellent question. Who do you think?
Well, I don't think people will. I think the rates go up, right? And again, I mean, you don't need rates to go up very much, given the current debt loads, not just of the government, but of people, of corporations. You cast your mind back to 2019, and what I've been talking about for the previous couple of years was the corporate debt bubble, right? The big issue then was not housing bubble the way it was the previous thing. It was all the levered loans and all the problems in the corporate bond markets, and that was starting to melt down. You saw that in the repo apocalypse in mid-September, right? And what did the Fed do? The Fed ran in and started printing money in September of 2019, long before the COVID virus showed up, right? So we were already in that problem. And what happened was all those corporate debt problems got papered over because the Fed boosted the money supply from 4 trillion to now 8 trillion. Right. And so that was put on hold. But you look around the corporate sector, they still have all this debt. In fact, they took on more debt because the ones that could did. Mm-hmm. And so if the economy weakens at all, you're still going to have that incipient corporate debt problem. And now you've got other credit problems too.
All right, so we're going to get to your gold outlook in just a bit. Sure. But first, let's talk about Fed policy now. They have 2 mandates, so let's narrow down on both of them, inflation and full employment. Let's talk about the labor market first. So we're not yet quite at full employment. What's keeping us there? From getting there?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. If you look at the aggregate figures, the job openings that the Bureau of Labor Statistics report is like 10 million job openings and about 7 million employees. You're like, well, I don't get it. I mean, why can't they all get jobs? And there are a couple answers to that. One is that just because there's a job opening doesn't mean enough skilled people to take it. And one of the real problems in society is, of course, is like drug use, right? And in the mining industry, for example, I talked to CEOs of mining companies that cannot find workers because they all fail the drug test. And so there's a mismatch of skills. There's a societal problem. And the other thing is the Fed response to COVID was to give people a lot of free money and to say you don't need to pay your rent, for a while with all the eviction moratoriums. So a lot of people got a ton of money, and which they've been spending down. Saving rates have gone down a lot, but they still have this money. And one of the things the Fed has done, it's made it impossible.
अगर आप साइड जाते हो तो $10,000 के भी आसपास जाते हो दिख सकते हैं फिलहाल 1751.85 86 के लेवल्स पे अपनी ओपनिंग के आसपास ओके अपनी ओपनिंग से अपसाइड जाते हुए देखने को मिल रहा है और वनडे कैंडल की बात करें तो वनडे कैंडल एक शॉर्ट रेड कैंडल के साथ मूवमेंट दिखाती हुई 1753.99 पे ओपनिंग थी 1751.78 के लेवल्स पे सो हम लोग आज का सेशन यहीं पे एंड करते हैं थैंक यू सो मच फॉर ज्वाइनिंग एंड इफ यू वांट मी टू एंड द सेशन काइंडली प्रेस 100 in the chat box. ओके सो हम लोग मिलते हैं वापस से शाम के सेशन में थैंक यू सो मच फॉर ज्वाइनिंग एंड कंसंट्रेटिंग आई एम एंडिंग दिस सेशन राइट हियर